Razzall Brand has had many incarnations. How did he become a Christian influencer?
The comedian faces trial this year for multiple counts of rape and sexual assault, which he denies. And yet he's also relaunching his career again.
From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redman in London.
And I'm Asma Khalid in Washington, D.C. And welcome to The Global Story on YouTube.
Just a quick note before we start, this episode contains references to drug abuse, so please take care while watching, especially with kids. We have to state at the start of this episode that Razzall Brand has been charged with 3 counts of rape, 3 counts of sexual assault, and 1 of indecent assault in the UK. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges. His trial is due to start in October of this year. And a particularity of UK law means that we cannot say anything about that case while it's ongoing. So we're going to proceed on that basis. And I'm very pleased to say that we're joined by the BBC's media editor, Katie Razzall. Katie, so good to have you with us.
Great to be back. Thanks for asking me.
Katie, Razzall Brand has lived many lives in the public eye. Some would say many rebrands, many rebirths. Can you begin by just telling us how he first became famous?
Well, yes. I mean, back then it was actually a fairly well-trodden route. So he started off doing comedy shows at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which is the big festival in the summer that happens every year in Scotland and has made the careers of lots of comedians. And he continued doing stand-up comedy. I'm talking about, the kind of early 2000s, and was then hired by MTV as a presenter. And I think, back then he was obviously very witty. He was sharp. He's becoming more and more known by people. But he, did then say after 9/11, the day after 9/11, he turned up at MTV dressed as Osama bin Laden, and he said he was fired for that. After that, he did in fact go into rehab. So he's been clear that in 2002 he went into rehab for his addiction to various drugs. So it didn't all go without controversy, but just one sign of how much of a sort of shock jock he was. And comedy is like that, isn't it? If you're a comedian, you're always trying to push the boundaries. And Razzall Brand did that almost on every appearance and every job he ever did.
Ruler is out. Fiddlesticks. I had a guinea on her to claim first prize.
I mean, he's a guy who's been around in the British public forum for a long time. I mean, I remember he came on my radar probably in the mid-2000s when he did a spin-off show attached to that reality TV show Big Brother.
Thank you. Cheers. Hello. Hola, amigos. Je voudrais Razzall.
And then there was a controversial moment, maybe his most controversial moment in his early career, when he got a show on the BBC, Radio 2, which is, for our American listeners, is one of the biggest radio stations in the country. And he was a DJ, and his show ran for a few years until a fateful moment when he made a phone call to a guy called Andrew Sachs.
What, this is Andrew Sachs' answer phone? Right, Jonathan, well, this is unconventional.
I'll blur something out.
Don't blur something out. Not on the answer phone,
Sorry,
Jonathan.
I can't answer at the moment.
Now, Andrew Sachs, how do you describe Andrew Sachs, Katie?
Well, Andrew Sachs was known to, I would say, every Brit, certainly, and probably people further afield, because he was an actor who was in Fawlty Towers. People might remember that British comedy starring John Cleese.
A kind of cult 1970s show.
When you've left your message, just hang up, or for more options, press 1 at any time.
Hello, Andrew Sachs. This is Razzall Brand. I'm a great appreciator of your work over a decade.
He made this phone call that was in which he basically goaded this man, Andrew Sachs, about the fact that he had claimed to have had sex with his granddaughter.
Phone down, put the phone down, code red. I'm sorry, Mr. Fawlty, I'm sorry. You're a waste of space. Oh, no, Jonathan.
Why did you tell me? I forgot. You were talking about his great... You mentioned her, and then it was in my head, and then it came out.
I know, you can't be blamed for this. You're just trying your hardest.
I carry that around in my head like a big brain blister all day.
It's too much.
And the co-host at that point on that day was Jonathan Ross, who's also a very famous TV presenter and still is now. But they left a series of messages on Andrew Sachs's answer machine, as you say, talking about, Russell Brand having sex with Sex's granddaughter. It was broadcast, so clearly whatever BBC systems were in place did not work because it went out. And then the newspaper, the Mail on Sunday, kind of reported on it, and there were huge numbers of complaints, I think 40,000 complaints to the BBC, and the BBC apologised, and Russell Brand had to resign, as did the Radio 2 controller, Leslie Douglas, and Jonathan Ross, actually, who also worked for the BBC, was suspended for 3 months. But Russell Brand at that point, he did apologise, but he did also say during his last show on the station that the messages were funny.
And so he lost his career then at that point with the BBC.
He did lose his career in the sense that, he had to leave, but it didn't seem to impact him as much as you might imagine.
He almost got more famous after that, didn't he?
Well, I think there is that old adage, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and perhaps that really, he personifies that in a way, because he became notorious for what happened, and that just added to his fame. So, he'd already done one movie, in fact, Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Hollywood came back to him, after this, after he had to resign. So he ends up getting married quite briefly to the pop star Katy Perry, and that's because they meet on the sequel to the first Hollywood movie he did.
This lewd rock star persona in that film, right? Yeah.
And after that, they start dating, and a year later, they married in this traditional Hindu ceremony in India, in Rajasthan.
Katie, I was asking him how much he'd learned about music from you, and
he taught me about music. Actually, he's kind of reshaped my influences. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, a lot of Morrissey. He's got the taste. Hopefully my record will be good now because of it.
Thank you. I like to think I'm an influence, because my comedy now is all about sort of domesticity and looking after cats and burglar alarms and all cleaning your teeth together. But it's about roaring through the London streets with razor blades and ticker tape and glitter all over your tongue.
And they married and, fairly soon split up. And in fact, hideous moment, he dumps her by text in 2011 just as she was about to go on stage, and I think she has said, possibly he has said, they have not spoken since. So this was not
since a text message.
I think not.
Wow.
That era of him starring in Hollywood movies and his brief marriage to Katy Perry, though, did make him more of a figure, I would say, in American culture, right? You mentioned that he's a British guy, and I think he increasingly has become well known here in the United States. And part of that was that era.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. He became known. American eyeballs were on him. They photographed him and Katy Perry a lot. He is a guy who sucks up attention. In a way, he's one of those people who, in a sense, everyone felt it. He felt that it felt as if he was an honest person, in the sense that he was being very open, not just about his addictions, but also about the sex he had, the relationships he had, the orgies, that, it was all on the surface, and felt like he was somebody telling us, exposing his life in a kind of honest, meaningful way. I think he was quite beguiling, actually, charismatic and beguiling, and people started to listen to him when he went through, he's one of these people who's had lots of iterations. And when he was in a sort of political campaigner, man of the people phase, which he might say he's still in.
Well, yeah, I remember that very vividly. It kind of started in the mid-20-teens and then became a really big thing around the general election. He became a political player somehow. What do you remember about that, Katie?
He absolutely was. So I was about to arrive at BBC Newsnight, which is a flagship show on the BBC and news and current affairs programme. And just before I arrived, so I know it was 2013, he had done an interview with Jeremy Paxman, who was the kind of lead presenter, the main presenter of Newsnight, a very famous news presenter in Britain.
Russell Brand, who are you to edit a political magazine?
Well, I just suppose like a person who's being politely asked by an attractive woman. I don't know what the typical...
And he told Jeremy Paxman that he didn't think people should vote, that he'd never voted, and he didn't think people should vote. And Jeremy Paxman gave him a hard time about it.
You've never, ever voted?
No, do you think that's really bad?
So you struck an attitude, before the age of 18?
Well, I was busy being a drug addict at that point because I come from the kind of social conditions that are exacerbated by an indifferent system that really just administrates for large corporations and ignores the population that it was voted in to serve.
You're blaming the political class of the fact you had a drug problem?
But actually, it's quite interesting because afterwards I saw something that Jeremy Paxman said where he essentially said, we ought to admit it. He said, we really ought to admit it. The Daily Mail columnist may think Russell Brand the spawn of the devil, but there is something irresistible about him. The energy, the loquacity, the camp manner, the apparent frankness. He stands squarely in the British tradition of cheeky chappies.
Katie, when you say that Russell Brand came out and said there was no point in voting, how were his politics perceived at the time?
Left-leaning, anti-establishment, fighting for the common man and woman, fighting against the powerful elites that forever, whatever party they are, in his characterization, never look after the poor, the disaffected people. He
So seen as quite a figure,
absolutely,
left-leaning
left-leaning, and he. He said, I come from that kind of background, and talked about his difficult childhood and his experience growing up in Essex, not in a poor household.
On the long and winding road of Russell Brand's various life transformations, the next big one would seem to be during the pandemic in 2021. He kind of repositioned himself. Can you describe that process for us?
Yeah, so he ends up positioning himself as a vaccine skeptic and questions whether the virus was real. So, he's doing more videos along those lines. I think, his position is, he's strongly distrusting governments. Well, that wasn't a shift, as well as strongly distrusting the media and institutions.
That is dictatorship, because nobody can claim from a religious or political or any ideological perspective to have sole exclusive access to truth. Truth is complicated.
So, yes, he criticised lockdown policies and on vaccine policies. I mean, he said he was asking questions rather than making direct claims. But of course, his critics accused him of spreading misleading or false information. And in fact, YouTube took down one of his videos citing its policy on medical misinformation.
Is that when he gets excluded from YouTube and starts to broadcast on Rumble instead?
Yes, exactly right. So Rumble is, think YouTube, but it's a video sharing platform. It's Canadian based. It describes itself as the kind of free speech alternative. And it's
immune to cancel culture.
Exactly, immune to cancel culture. And it's worth pointing out Russell Brand has more than 2 million followers on Rumble.
Okay, then in 2023, some UK newspapers, the Times of London and the Sunday Times and Channel 4, released the findings of a joint investigation. He denied all these allegations, and the night before publication, he posted a video stating that all of his relationships had been consensual. He accused the media of a, quote, coordinated attack. And he said, quote, amidst this litany of astonishing, rather baroque attacks are some very serious allegations that I absolutely refute. What happened to his career after that journalistic investigation was published?
Well, it wasn't great for him, obviously. He was dropped by his agent and also dropped by the publishing company. With him, he had a 2-book deal, and the Metropolitan Police launched an investigation. So a few months after this happened, he was baptised in the River Thames by Bear Grylls. If people know, is Bear Grylls a figure around the world?
I don't think outside of the UK. He's like a survivalist, Asma. He's a guy who goes into the wilderness and, eats trees and things like that.
You've painted a picture also of a Russell Brand who really built his career on being a comedian, a lewd comedian at times, being rather candid about some of his sexual exploits and addictions over the years. And then he has this conversion to Christianity, you say, shortly after these allegations come out.
Yes, absolutely right. So he does. He is baptized. He didn't get baptized anyway. He didn't get baptized in a church or, I don't know, quietly. He got baptized in the River Thames.
Katie, at the outset here, Tristan had outlined the charges that Russell Brand is facing there in the UK. 3 counts of rape, 3 counts of sexual assault, and 1 of indecent assault. And we then see Russell Brand turn up in court in February of this year to enter his plea of not guilty.
How you feeling, Mr. Brand? Blessed. All right, mate.
He was carrying a Bible. And I want to ask you more about this latest incarnation, if we can call it that, of Russell Brand, and that is his conversion to Christianity. Because not only did he have that baptism, he has now written a book called How to Be a Christian in 7 Days. It's the first book that's being put out, I believe, by Tucker Carlson, conservative commentator here in the U.S. He has an imprint now, and he's a very popular podcaster as well. Why do you see Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand teaming up?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? If you think about Tucker Carlson and some of those other high-profile YouTubers in America doing those sorts of shows, those interview shows that Tucker Carlson does, I mean, their whole USP is they want to speak to anyone without fear or favour. I mean, obviously, he's also a businessman trying to make a business, and he's working with Russell Brand and knows that doing an interview with him and around this book is going to publicise the book, is going to therefore publicise this imprint that he's just launched. I'm not here to judge anything around Russell Brand's conversion to Christianity, whether it's in good faith or not. That's not for me to judge. People are allowed to make mistakes and feel that they want redemption, and that is presumably what he says he's doing. Tucker Carlson is a Christian and is giving him a platform to publicise that and talk about what's happened in his life.
And in the past few weeks, we've seen Russell Brand appear not just on Tucker Carlson's show, but on a slew of different shows ahead of his book's release. Piers Morgan, Megyn Kelly.
So these are 3, Tucker Carlson, Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly are all, 3 high-profile people with making, their shows in the independent media, and they are the places that Russell Brand went to give his interviews. Now, I don't know whether if he'd come to the BBC and said, I'd like to do an interview with you, whether we would have done that. It's way above my pay grade. But certainly he was given a profile by these people. They would all argue we held his feet to the fire. But, I mean, did they? If you think about Piers Morgan, Piers Morgan did, he accused him of being a grifter, and they had quite a lot of backwards and forwards. And obviously,
there's this clip that had gone viral of him asking him to look for a particular, what was it, his favorite chapter or favorite verse from the Bible?
Yes, that was incredibly memeable and went everywhere because he spent more than 2 minutes, Russell Brand, flicking through this Bible, going backwards and forwards to try and find this passage in Isaiah that he said he'd been looking at in the court appearance. And it spawned loads of memes. It was interesting, is that... In a sense, I've spoken to some people who say that's just what he's like. That's performance art. He did that deliberately. It didn't look to me like he did that deliberately. He was, but equally, it's interesting that he was so relaxed about it. He didn't get tense.
One of the other viral moments on this tour he's done of US shows was on Megyn Kelly's show, where he said that he had sex as a 30-year-old with a 16-year-old girl. And I should say that in the UK, the legal age of consent is 16, not 18. So that would be legal in the UK. What else did he say about that?
Well, so what he said, he called himself an immature 30-year-old. And he said he was a different person back then.
I'm interested to ask you, Asma, when you watch these videos of him, in interviews with prominent US presenters, how does he come across, would you say, to an American? He has a very stylized, particular way of speaking. How does that appear when you're sitting in the United States?
If you look at him in conversation with someone like Tucker Carlson, it's not an accountability interview. It's 2 men who seem to have a kinship, just having a conversation about common things, in this case, Christianity, the Bible. And you'll see in other interviews, he wears a large cross necklace. So some of this, I think, is really interesting, that in the American public, faith is a big part of our conversation. To be publicly Christian, I think, is really different than how it would perhaps resonate there in the UK. And so he is certainly leaning into that in some of the interviews he's been doing with American podcasters.
And does that go down well?
There's a segment of the population that I think for whom that would really resonate. And I do think it's worth pointing out that, Russell Brand's now moved to Florida. So there's certainly a part of American society for whom this message resonates, and you see him having quite a kinship when he's on some of these American podcast platforms, not really having accountability interviews. They're just like conversations. Two guys, Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand, sitting down to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just chat, talk and talk and talk. I don't think Russell Brand
quite long.
suffers from self-doubt, and he definitely doesn't suffer from worrying that his opinions don't need to be aired or shouldn't be aired.
There's a segment of the population that will see this as him being a grifter. I mean, I think what I find so fascinating about Russell Brand in some ways is that he's had these different lives, these different incarnations. I mean, that's a question I've had, Katie, is that, over the course of his career, he has rebranded himself many times. He's appeared on all these different platforms. He's had a number of controversies, as you say, and yet he has managed to keep his career alive and continuously rebrand. And there are certainly those who will see his new book, How to Become a Christian in 7 Days. They will see his embrace of Christianity as just the latest development for a man who has become very comfortable at rebranding himself over the years.
Yeah,
changing where the public winds go.
We've certainly seen lots of iterations of Russell Brand, lots of versions of him. So stand-up comedian turned actor, turned go-to voice for the disaffected, to a YouTuber delivering, in his view, true news, somebody who talks about wellness, then a kind of COVID campaigner, morphing into a sort of wronged person as he sees it, anti-establishment, anti-media, now being brought down by the legacy, the mainstream media as he sees it. He tells, I can't remember which interview he did, but, he talks about, I'm deeply fascinated with the truth. I feel like I've been on trial all my life.
My whole life's a trial. And it's not culminating, because there will be a life after it, whether it's in jail or not. But in that trial, in the hardest times, I've found him.
The thread throughout is a need to be noticed, and he's not unique in that. I mean, show business, the media is full of people like that. And I suppose also being a contrarian and a chest bearer, if you like, of opinions, but actually also now literally, he's often bare-chested, and now, you're talking about that cross, but, this cross round his neck, it's an absolutely enormous, heavy-looking cross on a big, long, is it rope or chain? I'm not sure what that is. But he's never done things quietly.
Katie, we've done a few episodes on The Global Story recently about whether or not certain figures in the public eye these days are uncancelable. So we did an episode about Kanye West, and after he was banned from traveling to the UK. We did one about Candace Owens and her allegations about Brigitte Macron, the First Lady of France. Do you think the idea that some people might be uncancelable is a thing now?
There are always platforms that will host people who other people say are cancelled and persona non grata, and that's just a bit. That's around the polarization in our society, but it's also about the kind of the way media has kind of disaggregated, if you like. And so there's a lot of that. I mean, clearly there are lines in the sand. Russell Brand has a court case coming up. As Piers Morgan pointed out to him, he could end up in prison. And would he be cancelled if he's in prison? I'm not even sure that going to prison does mean you're cancelled these days. But you're right. I think because of the way the media works, I'm not sure. Well, I made a whole podcast about cancellation as well. And one of the things I took away from it, and we were focused on one particular book and a story that blew up, actually soon after COVID and after Black Lives Matter. And one of the things I took away from it was cancelling at its height was at a point where Twitter, as it then was at its height. And the mob turned very forcefully on people. But now the social media world doesn't really work like that. X is changed. But when it comes to these high profile figures, there'll always be a platform for them to talk on. And if there isn't someone else's platform, they can talk on their own platform. And if you've got 2 million followers, those 2 million followers aren't going to just disappear overnight, are they?
Well, Katie, on that note, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
A quick note before we wrap up today's show. We did contact Russell Brand's legal team for a response to our show today, but they did not supply us with one. That's it for the Global Story today. Thanks as always for tuning in. And if you liked our show, then we should mention that the Global Story is also available as an audio podcast. You can find us every weekday on bbc.com or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.